The entire boardroom fell silent as the young maintenance engineer quietly packed her toolbox after being told her services were no longer needed. Just 24 hours earlier, she had saved the company's flagship manufacturing line with nothing more than a simple $120 repair. But instead of thanking her, the billionaire CEO dismissed her solution as too small for a corporation worth billions and proudly approved a flashy $12 million replacement system. What happened the very next morning would become the story that every executive in the city would remember for the rest of their lives. Before we begin, if you believe kindness, humility, and second chances still matter in today's world, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Dad Talks and Stories for more inspiring stories that remind us that character is worth more than money. Morning sunlight spilled across the massive glass headquarters of Halcyon Dynamics, one of the country's fastest-growing technology manufacturers. Employees hurried through the lobby carrying laptops and coffee cups, while investors admired the modern architecture that symbolized success. At the top floor stood CEO Everett Sloan, a man celebrated by magazines for his bold decisions and billion-dollar vision. He believed every problem could be solved with bigger investments, newer technology, and expensive innovation. Simplicity, in his eyes, belonged to people who lacked ambition. Far below the executive offices worked Marin Holloway, a quiet maintenance engineer whose uniform rarely attracted attention. She had spent years understanding every machine inside the factory, learning their sounds like a musician memorizing notes. She knew that many complicated failures were often caused by the smallest overlooked details. Her co-workers respected her because she never searched for recognition. She simply wanted every worker to return home safely after every shift. One busy afternoon, the company's most valuable production line suddenly shut down. Panic swept through the factory. Every minute of downtime meant hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost production. Consultants were called. Engineers studied complicated digital reports. Emergency meetings filled the conference rooms. Predictions of catastrophic equipment failure spread throughout the building. While executives debated million-dollar replacement plans, Marin quietly inspected the machinery herself. She noticed a tiny pressure valve that had cracked from ordinary wear. The replacement part cost only $120. After receiving temporary approval from her supervisor, she installed the part, restarted the system, and watched every machine return to life as if nothing had happened. Within minutes, the production line was operating perfectly again. News of her inexpensive repair reached Everett Sloan before the day's end. Instead of appreciating the remarkable efficiency, he viewed it as an embarrassment. He believed investors expected dramatic solutions, not inexpensive repairs that made billion-dollar leadership appear unnecessary. During an emergency board meeting, he rejected further discussion of the repair and announced a complete modernization project worth $12 million, insisting that world-class companies should never depend on inexpensive fixes. The announcement spread through the company like a cold wind. Many employees admired Marin's practical thinking but remained silent, afraid to challenge the CEO. Marin herself accepted the decision with quiet dignity. She finished her shift, organized her tools, and walked home through the warm afternoon streets without resentment. She believed that doing the right thing mattered even when nobody applauded. That evening she visited her father, Aldrich Holloway, who lived in a modest countryside home surrounded by old oak trees. Neighbors knew him as a humble retired businessman who spent most of his days restoring antique furniture and helping local charities. Very few people knew that decades earlier he had quietly built one of the nation's largest investment groups before stepping away from public life after his wife's passing. Wealth had never interested him as much as integrity. As Marin shared the events of the day, she spoke without bitterness. She never criticized Everett Sloan personally. She simply wondered why some leaders found it difficult to value wisdom when it came wrapped in ordinary clothing instead of expensive suits. Aldrich listened carefully, saying very little while studying the expression on his daughter's face. What touched him most was not the rejection itself but the fact that she still wished success for the company despite how she had been treated. The following morning, Halcyon Dynamics prepared for another day of ambitious announcements. Investors gathered in the executive conference hall expecting updates about the costly modernization project. Everett Sloan entered confidently, convinced that his decision would impress everyone present. Just minutes before the presentation began, an elderly gentleman arrived carrying nothing more than a leather briefcase. Security welcomed him immediately after confirming his invitation from one of the company's oldest shareholders. Few people recognized Aldrich Holloway until whispers began moving through the room. Faces slowly changed as financial executives realized that the quiet visitor controlled one of the country's largest private investment funds. Aldrich calmly congratulated Everett on building an impressive company before requesting permission to speak. He explained that great businesses were not measured by how much they spent solving problems but by how wisely they respected the people capable of solving them. He described how innovation often began with ordinary individuals whose experience could never be replaced by expensive machinery. Then he opened his briefcase. Inside rested a certified investment commitment worth $120 million. The room froze. Aldrich explained that the investment had originally been prepared for Halcyon Dynamics months earlier because he believed the company possessed extraordinary potential. However, after learning how genuine talent had been dismissed simply because the solution lacked a dramatic price tag, he had reconsidered what kind of leadership deserved such trust. Instead of handing the check directly to the CEO, he placed it gently on the conference table where everyone could see it. He announced that the investment would only move forward if the company committed itself to recognizing talent at every level, rewarding practical thinking, and creating opportunities where respect mattered more than job titles. For the first time in years, Everett Sloan felt something that no quarterly report had ever taught him. Looking around the room, he realized nobody admired his expensive decision anymore. They admired the maintenance engineer whose honesty had inspired confidence far greater than any $12 million project ever could. Over the following weeks, Halcyon Dynamics changed in ways employees never imagined possible. Anonymous suggestion boxes became innovation programs. Maintenance teams joined executive planning meetings. Recognition programs rewarded practical improvements regardless of who proposed them. Marin was promoted not because of her father's influence but because everyone now understood how valuable her judgment truly was. Everett himself changed as well. He spent time walking the factory floor, learning names he had never bothered to remember before. He discovered that leadership became stronger whenever pride became smaller. His greatest achievement was no longer the expensive modernization project but rebuilding trust inside a company that had nearly forgotten the value of humility. The $120 million investment transformed the business, but its greatest return could never be measured in financial statements. It restored a culture where people believed their ideas mattered, whether they came from the boardroom or the workshop. Employees worked with renewed purpose because they knew character would finally receive the same respect as credentials. If this story reminded you that kindness, humility, and respect can change lives in ways money never can, please like this video, share it with your family and friends, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Dad Talks and Stories for more unforgettable stories that inspire hope. Special request, comment, character over pride, if you believe true greatness begins with humility. As the evening sun reflected against the factory windows, Marin walked through the same doors she had entered countless times before. The building looked exactly the same, yet everything inside had changed. One inexpensive repair had exposed the true cost of arrogance, while one father's quiet act of wisdom had reminded an entire company that the greatest investments are always made in people. Long after the headlines faded and the numbers disappeared from annual reports, employees continued telling the story of the day a simple $120 repair became the lesson that transformed a billion-dollar company forever.